All right, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. This is your host, Joe Imbriano. We're coming to you live from the busted up streets of woke and broke Fullerton, California. And today is Thursday, April 11th, 2024. And we're coming to you to deliver the truth, folks, so you can make sense of what you're being force fed so you can basically live on a diet of information that is healthy, that will benefit you. All right, sorry for the technical difficulty there, ladies and gentlemen, but we're back. All right, so I wanted to go into some information today about what we're hearing about on the news, right? And, you know, I don't spend a lot of time watching the news, but I do pay attention to what these people are feeding us so that we can understand what their agenda is. All right? So we're being told on a daily basis of all of these problems with the aircraft, ladies and gentlemen. Commercial airliners, right? Gosh, they're always after the airplanes, aren't they, folks? Well, we're going to get into this today, and we're going to talk about it, all right? It's high time we broach this issue. All right, once again, this is your host, Joe Imbriano, the Fullerton Informer, P.O. Box 4121, Fullerton, California, 92834, on the web at thefullertoninformer.com, and many other websites, folks, but without any further ado, let's get right into this topic, okay? So for those of you who don't know, I've lived in Southern California for most of my life, all right? So the bottom line is the Southern California region, this area, aside from its amazing weather, climate, and just overall standard of living that's been very good for many years, it's on the decline now, unfortunately. But by and large, this area has been sustained by aerospace industries and defense contractors. And there, for many years, were very high-paying jobs for, skilled laborers and professionals in these fields, okay? And the most strictest of standards were applied in the procurement of any product or good or even service that went into the airline industry. I'm not going to talk about the defense industry, folks, because we know that they've used your children to make weapons to kill everybody. And that's why you sent them to school to understand all these lasers and other stuff and everything else, right? That's why doing quadratic equations before the pimples clear up off their face, folks, because they got to inculcate them into being weaponized to make products and machines that are going to be used to kill everybody. But I digress, folks. All right. So the bottom line here is the airline industry for many, many years, from rivets to bolts to nuts to screws to panels to turbines to wiring harnesses, all these different things that went into the production of commercial airliners were of the highest level of quality control. I mean, it was the pride and joy for many years of these hardworking people in the aerospace industry to turn out a very safe product that made life a lot better for a lot of people. And that is the production of commercial airliners that allowed people to travel, allowed people to see their loved ones across the world, allowed people to see places that they would not ordinarily be able to see, and have experiences that they would not ordinarily be able to have. And for many years, in spite of how, well, I guess compared to today's standards, how lackluster the evolution of technology was in the the 50s and 60s, with the advent of the commercial jet airliner, speeds increased, travel distances increased, and time spent decreased on these routes to all these destinations. And we didn't have the problems that we have today, folks. okay? And back then, you know, the transistors were just emerging. We didn't have the computing power that we had. But what we had back then was a lot of people who cared a lot about their work and put in a good, hard day's work and an honest day's work. And, you know, we didn't have the safety problems that we have now, folks. All right? So what is going on today? You know, I remember the stuff that used to have to go into making a fastener and how expensive it would be to buy a fastener that would go into a jet airliner as opposed to a fastener that would hold the exhaust manifold on a Toyota Celica. It would be 100 times more expensive because of the quality control. Now we're being told that all that's being thrown out the window. We have these whistleblowers that are exposing all of these flaws in the production process, in the assembly line process. And now we're having panels peel off of engines. We're having doors fly out in the middle of the flights. We're having these aircraft nosedive into the ground unexplainably. And yet we're living in a time where automation and 3D printing and robotics and computing power has exponentially increased to the 10th power compared to when I used to board a 747 Pan Am flight to Boston to visit my grandma 50 years ago, right? And we never had any safety problems back then. And how many big, bulky airliners with primitive transistors were running the oxygen generating systems and the hydraulics and everything else? Now it's got high-level computers and all these redundancy fail-safe systems with all these amazing technological advances. And yet the most basic and primitive elements of these airliners are faltering. Ladies and gentlemen, I contend to you that they're bringing down the airline industry intentionally. Now, 9/11 was just the beginning of the war on air travel. And I'm not going to go into the weeds too deeply on 9/11 right now, but most of, not all of what you saw that morning was green screen to get you to believe that those towers were brought down by titanium and aluminum alloyed things with wings on them instead of resonant frequency weapons. Yeah, they had explosives there for window dressing, but those towers were brought down by resonant frequency weapons, folks. They were dustified. Study the construction of the Twin Towers. Do yourself a favor. Once they slap the Encyclopedia Britannica logo on this video for talking about this, why don't you look at how they constructed those towers, what they were constructed out of, and what they were built into, and what kind of conductive slurry they used for the foundation, and how it went into salt water, and how they were a cathode and an anode of a massive energy generating system. And of course, that antenna that they took off the North Tower, that thing got taken out of there right away, right? That thing was special. But folks, as far as airplanes being involved in that, it's very, very questionable. I'm of the opinion that there were no aircraft on September 11th, and what you saw were green screened images, all put out at the same time, and they're, you know, they were pumping jet fuel into the fire suppression systems, and they jammed all the firefighters' radios. All the cell phones weren't working that morning in that area. NORAD was on stand down running a drill, okay? And, you know, here we go, right? The narrative. And so the airline industry literally tanked, and it got the first of the 1-2 punches to the upper jaw, right, on the morning of September 11th. And no more flying the friendly skies. Now we're worried about, you know, they have these people that they blame for, you know, bringing suitcase bombs on these things and everything. And so now people all of a sudden after September 11th were petrified to fly. I know people that have never gotten in an airplane again after that. nevertheless, airline travel is still by far the safest way to travel. Hands down, no questions asked, even today. Okay? Because there are far less interactions and far less potential for crashes and collisions than on the ground. Because as I am right now, I'm surrounded by multiple variables that involve risk. You know, I'm on the road with a bunch of medicated morons around me that are, well, let's just say they're not operating on all 8 cylinders, right? Because of what the allopathic petrochemical pill-pushing pimps in the butcher's outfit have done to them. So they're missing some of their faculties, right? But the bottom line is, the airline industry has always been a safe way to travel, and it's now starting to seem like it's not. And that's not an accident, folks. That's not an accident. Because one of the major agendas going forward is to keep us from traveling and to keep us from seeing things for ourselves and to keep us from understanding where we live, what we live on, why it's here, how it got here, and what it's made of, what it consists of, all of these things. And their plans for us are such that we are going to be limited to the Hunger Games model in these controlled compact cities, and only the elite by certain passes and privileges, if you will be allowed to travel on the Hunger Games trains. And what are you hearing about in the news all the time? These trains that they're building. They want to build a train from San Francisco to Los Angeles, okay? They want to build a bullet train from Las Vegas to San Francisco, or to Los Angeles, right? They want to bring in all the criminal element from San Francisco and then have a direct nonstop route to exchange it for the criminal element in Los Angeles. And they want you to sit on that train with, some guy coming down off the oxy cocktail of methadone and oxycodone and heroin and methamphetamine and, all the jib and all the stuff these guys are on. This, swinging around a hypodermic needle and a kitchen knife while you're locked in a steel railroad car with nobody around but a bunch of people staring at their cell phones. That's their plan for travel, folks. They don't want you in an airplane spending the money that you worked, that they're hiding all of the Kingdom Age architecture from us. They don't want you to know about that stuff. They want you to sit in a Black Mirror existence in a cage, generating electricity on a treadmill hooked up to a VR headset, getting your sustenance from a Soylent Green slurry on an IV drip, surrounded by black scrying mirrors, satanic electronic psychotronic Ouija boards called televisions that they label smart TVs that turn you into a moron. Oh, they don't want you flying in an airplane, folks. They don't want you seeing what the world has to offer. They don't want you getting in an airplane and flying 12 hours, going from Los Angeles to Italy to go see where your ancestors came from and see how they terraced into the mountains, all these lemon trees, tapping into the groundwater that's at, 1,000 feet up, even though it's not supposed to be there. Ladies and gentlemen, the airline industry is being destroyed by design. It's being taken down one rivet at a time. It's being peeled away one panel at a time. It's being brought to its knees. And the fear-mongering in the media is part of this. They don't want you traveling. They want you sitting in your chair, watching their television, believing their lies, eating their French fries, for crying out loud, that have been soaked in dimethyl siloxane sludge and TBHQ and BHT and all these chemical stabilizers that they put in these rancid oils that they shake and bake your brain into consuming, as they tell you about the acrylamide content of the frozen food section when you walk into the grocery store with the Prop 65 warning, right? Did you just follow what I just said? Think about this for just a minute, folks. And by the way, What else are they talking about? This Zelensky Stein guy, and all you hear about is the war in Ukraine. And, Zelensky Stein is, he's fighting this thing against Putin Stein. And, it's this big war, right? And yet, if you want to go right now, you can book a flight into Ukraine any day of the week, any time of the day. Oh, wait a minute. Since when can you fly into a war zone and bring a bottle of Jack Daniels and your girlfriend and go hang out in a jacuzzi in Kiev? Well, I guess you still can now. Never mind all the footage of the nightclubs over there in Ukraine where things appear to be normal. But if you turn on the news, you would think that what's going on over there is such a disaster that no one can survive, and it's just a matter of time before the world erupts into chaos, right? Well, if they've got you trapped in a room, surrounded by television screens, hooked up to a VR headset, getting your Soylent Green sustenance through an IV drip system as they got you drinking protein powder shakes instead of eating natural food, then you will believe everything. Just like they've trained our children.